Everybody for coming to our second webinar. We're super excited to dive into the results. So this is officially our second webinar of your home waste audit, which, as we said before, it's a collaboration that is a science project hosted by us, the U of T trash team, but really fueled by our community, which is you. And over the last few weeks, we asked you to take a deep dive together into your waste bins, which hopefully you had fun doing. And tonight, we're going to take a deep dive into our data. But before we do, we just have a few housekeeping things as well as some review to put all of our hard work in context. So first, we want to get to know each other and also acknowledge the land upon which we do our local work. So this time, last time you had 2 hosts, this time you have 3 hosts. So you're stuck with Hannah and I again, but we gain Raphaela. So tonight, I will be your MC. But I will also talk about the diversity of our waste streams. So the data that you provided to us about where you live and about your waste management system. Raphaela is going to talk about the data from the surveys you've been taking in Google Forms, and Hannah will share with you about the data that was in your waste. So just as a reminder to who I am, my name is Chelsea Rockman. I'm a professor at the University of Toronto, also a co-founder of the U of T trash team. I research all things plastic pollution and have been working on the issue for about a decade. And as I said today, I'll be talking about the diversity of all of our waste streams in addition to fielding questions and being your MC. Our second host is Rafa. As I said, Raphaela is going to discuss the data related to the surveys, and I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Raphaela and I'm co-founder of the U of T trash team. I'm a social scientist and I have been working on the social impacts of waste for more than a decade. And today I will share some of the survey results with you all, and I'm super excited to be here today.
Thanks, Raphaela. And our third host is who you've met before, Hannah, and she's going to share the data in your bins, and I'll turn it back over to her to remind you all of who she is.
Hi everyone, my name's Hannah DeFront. I'm a member of the U of T trash team and a microplastics researcher in Chelsea's lab at U of T. My research is mostly lab-based, but I really loved helping carry out the home waste audit, and I'm really excited to share our results with you.
Awesome. And just a quick reminder of who we are. So we're all from the U of T trash team at the University of Toronto. Our mission is built around increasing waste literacy, connecting with people, having fun, and taking action. Ultimately, we use education, public outreach, and scientific research to deliver evidence-based solutions to decrease solid waste and promote a circular economy. This particular project is one of our science-based solution projects, and we're thrilled to be able to collaborate on it with all of you. And finally, before we begin, it's important to recognize the history of the lands we call home. We are thrilled to have people joining us from all over, in 2 countries actually. And so we extend our acknowledgements to the Indigenous and traditional past across all of the territories. For our team, we will speak to the land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we're grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land and collaborate. And before we show you the data, just really quick, we want to set the scene, remind you about the issue, and talk about the objectives of tonight's audit. So the objectives of our home waste audit were to learn about the waste stream in the municipality in which you live. This means learn what bins you have: recycling, landfill, compost, and what goes in each one of them. And also to decrease your waste footprint and divert waste away from the landfill bin by either reusing products or maybe recycling them. The objectives of tonight's webinar is to show the differences in waste management across where we all live, to share the survey results about waste behavior and literacy, including during this time, during COVID-19, and also to share the results showing our self-reported waste habits over the last 4 weeks. For this webinar, we wanted to make it a little more interactive than the last one, and so we will do some Q&A throughout. So I quickly just want to go through the instructions on how you ask or answer a question. So there's 2 ways. One, you can write things in the chat at any time, and someone from our team will answer them. Or you can raise your hand with the raise hand function. If you click on participants, you'll see the raise hand button by your name, especially if you hover over it. And then I will call on you, lower your hand and unmute you, and you're welcome to have a conversation. Okay, so just as a reminder, why are we doing this? Well, Hannah told us all at our last webinar that plastic pollution is, of course, we know, a problem. We estimate that more than 8 million metric tons of plastic enters the ocean every single year. And in fact, that number is an old number, and a project that Hannah and I are finishing up suggests that about 19 million metric tons of plastic enters aquatic habitats every year at this moment. Plastic doesn't decompose. It lasts in the environment for a long time, slowly breaking up into little pieces that we call microplastics. And it can threaten wildlife. They ingest it, they can become entangled in the big stuff, and overall, it is not good. So, what can we do about it? Well, that's where we turn to all of you to help us with two of the things. Overall, we think broadly, solutions sort of go into three bins. One is reducing consumption, one is waste management, and one is cleanup. Within this project, we were focusing on the first two. So as you were working in the waste audit, you might have thought of many different diverse ways to reduce our consumption and waste, which we'll talk a bit about later. So we can reduce the materials we use by reducing consumption or reusing. But when we use materials that are destined to become waste, we can choose ones that fall more into a sustainable waste management stream, and that's where waste management comes in. So a more sustainable waste management stream is not the landfill. Of course, landfill is better than the environment, but recycling or compost keeps it in a circular economy, or at least a circular system. So to do this, it's really important that we understand our waste stream. So as the first step in a survey we asked you to do, we asked you to learn more about the management of the waste where you live in. And we did this for two reasons. One, to increase your waste literacy if this information was new to you. And two, we wanted to be able to have data to show you just how diverse our waste streams are in the places that we live. In a minute, you'll see how harmonized our waste streams are. When they vary by so many things, so when they're not harmonized, we recycle different things, for example, it can lead to confusion. So before we start to dive into some of our data and I show you the diversity of our waste stream, I want to ask tonight's first question, and that is, can anyone tell me why you think knowing about your waste management may help you reduce the waste you send to landfill? So how did what you learn in terms of the waste management in your area help you reduce the waste in your black bin, which is where it is here in Toronto, or at least your bin that goes to landfill? Does anyone have anything they want to share? Remember, you can either use the raise hand function or you can chat in the chat box. And if nobody shares, I'll share. Give you some time. Okay, so my thoughts on this one is one of the reasons why it's really important to be able to understand your waste management is because you can choose to procure or to purchase items that can go in recycling. So for example, in the city of Toronto, where I live, I can't recycle black plastic. The reason for that, I'll tell you in a minute, but this means when I buy things, I try to avoid things that are wrapped in black plastic. And unfortunately, one of my favorite yogurts has a black plastic lid. So I have to say goodbye to my favorite yogurt, purchase my second favorite, and at least then my Tupperware is recyclable. And then Allie, thank you for your answer. Knowing what we can recycle and compost means we don't have to put it in the garbage if it doesn't have to go there, right? So we also learn new ways to work with our waste, to put it in bins that we may not have realized before could go in a more sustainable place. Awesome. Okay, so let's learn about where we're all from. Overall, we had 15 people participate in this from the start to the end, which we're quite thrilled with, especially in the middle of summer and during a global pandemic. So thank you so much. So in our studies, we had people from 2 countries. This included both the United States and Canada. And within Canada, people were from Toronto, Etobicoke, King City, Ottawa, Sauk, and Vancouver. Within the United States, people were from Beaufort and Hyattsville. So this encompasses Ontario, BC, North Carolina, and Maryland. So we span 2 countries, 4 states or provinces, depending on what you call them, and 8 cities. And as I said, with 15 other people. And at first glance, when you look at that map, you might think, how diverse can our waste stream really be? We don't live that far away, especially when you think about the whole globe. So let's check it out. First of all, we asked people, what are the waste streams in your neighborhood? So we looked at who had pickup for landfill, who had pickup for recycling and compost, or who had something else. It's pretty common for people within North America to have landfill waste curbside. So we were not surprised when 100% of you said that you have this option. But it is a privilege, and there are people around the world that don't necessarily have that. We were very pleasantly surprised to see that everyone had recycling curbside. For organics, there were 4 participants without. So this can be less common in some cities, but it's even less common in places like if you live within a city but you're in a condo or an apartment. And so if you checked no, one thing you might want to do is double check with your building just to be sure the bin isn't somewhere else. But we do understand that sometimes in those big buildings it is not there. Then you'll notice that 5 people had other, and this was always a bonus. This was yard collection or when you can put out big items. So other didn't mean they didn't have the things above, it just meant they actually had something else. So overall, everybody within this project is super lucky. We don't have to go further than our house to keep waste out of our landfill or in the environment, which, as a reminder, this is just not the case all over the world. Even for recycling, sometimes you have to drive to the materials recovery facility, and sometimes you even have to pay a fee, which is a barrier. So you might imagine if you had to go out of your way, you'd be less likely to not put it in your landfill. So having better waste management and more waste management really helps out. Okay, then we wanted to know, in your recycle bin, how does your city, your municipality tell you how to recycle? How easy is it to figure this out? Everybody was able to find that information, which is good. Go all of the cities that we live in. So here what you'll notice is that 60% of the people could sort their material by product type. So maybe they have a poster that says you can recycle plastic bags, you can recycle cutlery, you can't recycle straws, etc. But some people, 26.7 of them had it by material type. This means you look at the recycle codes on the bottom of your containers and it tells you whether you can recycle, say, codes 1 or 2 or 4. Sometimes this may be a little bit harder to figure out, particularly for materials that don't actually have a number on them. And then in some cases we had other, and for this it was often that they had both. So again, this seemed to be a bonus, but we'll ask about this a little bit later. So let's look at what some of these product differences are, because even though we're told differently, you're also going to notice differences within the cities in which we live. So here we really get to the how harmonized are our waste streams. So we chose 5 products that we happen to know vary across municipalities. So here are 5 common products that you probably use. And underneath each one, it tells you out of our 15 participants, how many lived in places where they could recycle them. So you'll notice that only 1 participant could recycle black plastic. This is because some material recovery facilities, or the MRF, has a laser in order to sort the plastic. So all the materials come through on a conveyor belt, and an automated machine shoots down a laser and uses spectroscopy to tell the type of plastic it is. Well, the laser is absorbed by the color black, and it can't tell the type of plastic. So as simple as that, this is why you can't recycle black plastic. In the one place where you can, it's probably more manual. Then you'll see that 10 out of 15 could recycle bags, 9 out of 15 styrofoam, 0 out of 15 straws, and 8 out of 15 cutlery. The reason for the small stuff is because it sometimes slips through the cracks and can actually harm the machinery. So here's my second question. Do you think waste harmonization across a province or a state or even a whole country could help increase the recycling rate? Now remember, Hannah told us that the recycling rate last time was around 10%. So why do we think having a more harmonized waste stream would help people recycle more? Does anyone have a guess or a thought? We have one. Oh, Sarah, I'm gonna unmute you.
Yeah,
Go ahead and answer.
I just guess it will be a lot easier for everybody to understand what they can recycle and what they can't if it's just kind of common knowledge across the board.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes it easier for people. And sometimes when things are confusing, you just people just give up. But if it's easy and it's clear, people may be more likely to do it. Mateus, did you have another suggestion or comment?
Hi. Oh, yes. So I think that could lead to some sort of standardization of packages and stuff that you can find the information in an easy way.
Absolutely. And I've heard some people say when I've been giving talks in places and I talk about the waste harmonization and how it's not harmonized, they say, this type of stuff makes me not trust my municipality. And so I just don't even bother, or I just throw everything in. And then you have wish cycling, which Hannah told us about before. So working towards a more harmonized system is great. And British Columbia actually has one across their entire province, and their recycling rate, as well as the contamination in their recycling, is better than in Ontario. Okay. So now we're going to turn it over to Raphaela to share with us the results from our survey. Raphaela, take it away.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Chelsea. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you perfectly.
Oh, sorry. Okay, so we understand that pandemic brought a new scenario and challenge for waste management. And throughout those months, there were growing concerns about impact on the environment, on the health of the workers who need to handle the waste, and concerns that pandemic might set us back on our fight against single-use plastics. On the top of that, our waste generation and habits change in different ways. So for this waste audit activity, one of our goals was trying to understand how your waste habit might have changed during this very challenging time. And over the next slides, I would like to share and walk you through some of the results with you all. So thank you for participation. So the first result I want to share with you all is regarding the participants' perception of how the amount of weekly household waste changed since COVID, but before the waste audit. If you look at the pie graph, about 80% of the participants self-reported an increase in their weekly household waste, with 52% increased a little, you can see in red, and 26% increased a lot, and you can see in green. Interestingly, this number is aligned with results released in May by the Ontario Waste Management Association, showing that there was an increase in total residential waste generating, varying from 5 to 20%, depending on the location in Ontario. Now we are going to look if the amount of single-use plastic waste you produce have changed during COVID. We provide 6 categories for you to answer, such as takeout containers, disposable coffee cups, plastic bags, and so on. As you can see, the results are very different, depends on the single-use item. So for this reason, the next few slides will bring the same graphs organized into 3 categories based on the most recurring answers. And we will see the items that decrease, increase, and stay about the same. It's no surprise that the top item that decreased a lot was the disposable coffee cups. You can see in purple. Assuming that during pandemic we are not going out as before, this result probably reflects the coffee shops we have skipped. Having said that, the results also show that disposable coffee cups consumption of a large number of participants stayed the same. You can see in orange, and some increased in red and blue. And if you are wondering what this light blue bars represents, it's the not applicable category. So meaning that participants don't use this item. On the other hand, Plastic bags and plastic food packaging were the single-use items that have the largest number of answers for increased a little, represented by the color dark blue, and a lot in red. So yeah, we had a lot of plastic bags and plastic food packaging consumption. Disposable cutlery and plastic bottles were the single-use items that have the greatest number of answers for stay about the same, as you can see in orange. And again, the light blue bar shows that participants don't use this item. And the result for the takeout container was the most interesting one. So if you look at the graph, you can see how differently we are dealing with our food consumption. It's hard to know the reasons because we didn't ask it, but we are suspecting that there are people who now have more time to prepare their own meal, and for that reason, it decreased a lot, represented by the color purple, and a little represented by the color green. Whereas some increased their takeout orders, probably to replace their restaurant routine, as you can see in dark blue and in red. So another part of the questionnaire focus on whether you learn something new, reading about your local waste stream, and taking the survey. And I'm very happy to report that 73% of participants learned something new during this time. And we would love to share with you some of the comments. So some participants learn about where the different items go, and specifically about the recycling bin and information provided by the city. So one participant said, I learned that way more can be recycled than I thought. Another said, I learned how the waste wizard is extremely easy to use. And here, I would like to highlight why, Chelsea already said that, but I would like to highlight why it's so important to check out your local waste stream. For example, one participant said that you can put a chopstick in the green bin, and it's absolutely correct because that's the reality from Ottawa. But here in Toronto, for example, the chopsticks go in the garbage bin. So we always needed to have our local waste stream information in hand so we can avoid putting our waste in the wrong bin. Another result that I would like to share is how many different changes all of you made throughout the waste audit. It's amazing. Well done for you all. And the top 3 responses were: look for information on how to dispose your waste properly, swap a single-use plastic for a reusable alternative, and upcycled or reused items that would otherwise go to waste. But other changes were reported as well, like learn how to cook something new from scratch instead of buy it in packaging, requested less plastic with online takeout orders, watched a webinar or documentary about waste like this one, throw items into the recycling bin that you previously would have put in the landfill bin. So you should be proud of yourself. Well done. And some of those changes were easy and some more difficult. And the easiest change that participants replied were remembering which bin to place items in and reusing and repurposing items. And here are some of your answers on why were they simple changes. We already looked for, one of the participants said, oh, we already looked for less single-use plastic before, so we just increased that. Another participant said, so saving more ripped, broken things to use differently was a good next step for me, and no more wish cycling here. So those are the simple changes. And the most difficult change was by far buy items with no packaging or with less packaging. And buy items with no packaging or less packaging and avoid single-use plastic were among the top 3 most difficult changes made. And other difficult changes were also reported, like buy items packaged in recyclable materials, reusing repurposing items, and remember which bin to place items in. And here are some of your answers on why was this the most difficult change. Some of the participants reported that difficult changes were specifically related to COVID, where you can no longer fill up containers at bookstores, for example. And other participants replied that difficult changes were related to find alternatives with less packaging. And we can find this pretty easy in our grocery. It's very hard to find packaging without plastic or with less plastic. So our last question was about where you found tips to reduce waste. And 90% of participants answered the webs that they found answer tips on the website. So here I would like to ask you, please, if you remember, tap in the chat box what website you thought was useful, so we can all share information and we can look in Google later. So I will give 1 minute for you to share. Oh, I cannot see the answers here. Okay. Okay,
I don't have any answers yet, Raphaela, but you've got people talking about how difficult it is to buy items without packaging. Although somebody says, Ali says, mostly following things like Zero Waste Canada on Facebook. That's great. We should tell our friends at ECCC, as well as local municipalities. This is great, government websites.
Oh yeah, now I can see, okay. Transition Souk, okay. What is that? Says, our trash team on Twitter, yeah, that's great. We are happy for that. Trash team tips, that's amazing. Thank you. So, okay, let's move on to the next one. The last, okay. So the last result I want to share here with you, it's some of the participants' favorite waste reduction tips. So one of them said, the best way to prepare recycling and reuse before recycling. Other shares shampoo bars, buy in bulk, avoid dark plastic trays, finding new ways to reuse old objects, use beeswax wrap instead of cleaned wrap. So those are all great tips. And speaking of beeswax, I want to share something. I just got some beeswax from an apiary and I will try to make my own beeswax wrap. So I'm super excited about that. Before I pass over to Hannah, who will present the data from the waste audit, I would like to open for a quick question. 100% of the participants who answered the survey would recommend the home waste audit. And we would like to know, why do you think home waste audit was helpful to you?
Just as a reminder, if anyone wants to answer the question outside the chat, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll take you off mute.
Good, yep. Okay.
Ali says, it made me pay so much more attention to every little thing I put in the bin. Me too. It's great.
Me too. Okay. Mateo said that he learns a lot, especially what goes in where. Yes. Tatiana, because you realize the first time how much waste you have. Yes. And what you can change in your habits to reduce it. Yes, I agree. When we start to look at and pay attention what we are throwing the garbage, we realize how much we produce, how much waste we produce. Yes, true. We'll be doing a school waste audit. Kate is asking, will you be doing a school waste audit? Well, we never thought about that, but there are many schools in Toronto who had the eco school clubs and eco school group, and they usually do waste audit in the school with the kids. So the kids do the teachers monitoring, and the kids do by themselves the waste audit. So yes, maybe you can look into those schools. Yes. So I will pass over to Hannah. Thank you for replying the question.
Okay, so thanks, Rafa. So now we've been through the survey responses. I'm now going to present the waste audit data, which was collected on the data sheets, which you as participants kindly filled in for us. So one of the first questions we asked participants in survey 1 was, how many items of trash do you estimate your household produces in 1 week? And for this question, you can see that in red, most of the responses and blue were split between 0 to 50 items and 51 to 100 items per week. And just under 22% of respondents believe they threw away over 101 items per week. Here we can see that the actual results from week 1 are in the pie chart on the right-hand side. So we can see that in reality, most people in red actually threw away 51 to 100 items in the first week of the audit. And from this data, we can see that most of us actually underestimated our amount of weekly waste. And we expected some underestimation because often we don't think about all the tiny pieces of trash that we throw away, like produce stickers or pieces of tape. And these are all recorded in the waste audit data, which might explain the difference between the two results. Okay, so in survey 3, we also asked you to reflect on how you thought your landfill waste had changed throughout the home waste audit. And in the survey responses, just under half of participants believed that their level of landfill waste stayed about the same. The other half of participants were split mostly between believing their landfill waste increased a little or decreased a little. And in purple, we can see only 11% of participants believe they decreased their landfill waste by a lot. And here we can see how landfill waste actually changed over the course of the audit. So you'll notice on the y-axis that we're here representing the number of items per week on average per household, rather than volume. And although we asked you to record volume as well, we found that the item by item data was more meaningful to present here. So across the 4 weeks, we can see here that landfill waste shows a decrease. And between weeks 1 and 3, we saw the largest decrease from on average 46 to 35 items per week. And in week 4, this increased slightly back up to 38 items per week. We also asked you about your recycling waste and how that had changed throughout the audit. And nearly all of participants believed that their recycling waste stayed about the same. Here, the data shows that over the course of the 4 weeks, recycling waste increased slightly from 41 to 46 items per week on average. And although this is an increase, we actually hope this is the result of survey 2, where participants learned about their local waste streams and possibly learned that more items could be put in the recycling than they had previously thought. So here we have the results for landfill waste in black, and then recycling waste in blue, and then in orange we have total waste at the top. So you can see overall the total amount of waste fluctuated over the course of the audit, and in week 1 we threw away an average of 86 items per week, and by week 4 we threw away 87 items per week. So there wasn't really much change. However, when we look at the recycling and landfill together, this is a great overall result, because one of our main objectives for the Waste Audit Challenge was to divert waste away from your landfill bin. And these results show that we've achieved just that. So although our total waste didn't change very much, we can see that participants were putting more items in the recycling and less in the landfill. And so far, the graphs I've been showing you have been average numbers of items for waste across all households. And this figure just shows the average number of items thrown away per person per week. And for those of you with dogs, I counted the dog as half a person for this, but please tell them not to take offense. This is just because they are only responsible for some of the waste produced. So again, we can see here that the total amount of waste fluctuated across the 4 weeks. And by the end of the audit, we individually produced about 38 items of waste per week, and 55% of this was recyclable waste. So we'd love to pause here and hear your thoughts on this. So does anybody have any comments on why you think total waste didn't change much? And how do you feel about this number? Do you think you could reduce the number of waste items further than you already have? I'll just wait a moment for anyone to comment.
We have a hand raised from Greg. Greg, I'm going to unmute you and you can go ahead and speak. I think. Oh. Sorry.
Hi, thank you. So Hannah, you were saying that waste per person didn't really change across the audit.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if maybe that's perhaps kind of a response bias from the 15 people that participated. Like, we are generally more concerned about waste than most people. So we're already doing kind of like the low-hanging fruit activities to reduce our waste.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I thought the same, actually. People who take part in a challenge like this are already keen to reduce their waste. You might have already done some big changes. So it's just those tiny ones, which might not make a huge difference in number, but they might be like reusing certain items and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And also we had a comment saying from Tatiana saying the process can definitely take longer than just 4 weeks, which is also a very good point. And it's a good thing in a way to take more than 4 weeks to make these changes, because then you're more likely to keep them up if you do it over a long period of time. So that's great. Oh, we got Sarah.
We have one more. Yes, Sarah, I'm going to take you off mute.
Yeah, I was just going to agree with that point, because I think I was concentrating more on working out what could go in the recycling. But if I was going to look at this for a longer period, I think gradually you would reduce your overall waste. But like the point before, I think that does take a lot longer to kind of change.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Awesome answers.
Yeah, great. Okay, so now we're going to go a little bit deeper into the data. So you might remember that on the data sheets, we asked you to categorize items as either plastic, paper, metal, glass, or other. And this just shows those material types for the landfill waste. So you can see on the graph that in green, plastic was by far the highest number of items by material type in landfill. And whilst most other material types stayed the same throughout the 4 weeks, the number of plastic items in landfill decreased steadily throughout the challenge, which is great to see. And then within recycling waste, the most common item in week 1 was again plastic in green, closely followed by paper in blue. And what I thought was quite interesting is that we can see the amount of plastic recycling decreased throughout the audit, and the amount of paper recycling increased. So from this, we could assume a couple of things. It could be that some efforts were made to choose paper alternatives instead of plastic packaging, or maybe people participating didn't know certain paper items were recyclable before, and they were putting more of those in their recycling bins. And then digging a little bit deeper again, I wanted to look at the specific items. So here we have 2 word clouds to show the most common items thrown away in week 1 in both landfill and recycling. And you can see for both, the top item was plastic packaging, which is not surprising at all. And in the landfill, there were also a lot of produce stickers. which is really interesting. And in recycling, there are a number of cardboard boxes as well. And then if we look at week 4, so the largest words indicate the highest number of items. So by week 4, the most common item in landfill waste was still plastic packaging. However, things look a little bit different in the recycling. So although plastic packaging was still one of the most common items, the top item was paper, closely followed by cardboard boxes and drink cans. And I thought maybe everyone's just a bit exhausted by the end and just needed a drink. And that's why there's so many cans. Okay, so before I pass on to Chelsea, I wanted to just take a quick moment to talk about the other category on the waste audit data sheets. So most items that were in this category were mixed materials that are really difficult to know whether you can recycle them or not. Things like chip packets and Q-tips and take-out coffee cups. And items like this often have 2 or more materials combined. So for example, chip packets are made from a mixture of aluminum and then a layer of plastic. So since recycling plants cannot separate these 2 layers, these mixed materials can't be recycled. So unfortunately, they get sent to landfill. But for some mixed materials, for example, envelopes which have the plastic window in them, we can actually help out recycling plants by separating the 2 parts and placing them in the recycling separately. However, in general, these items are always very tricky. So think about if we're confused about where to categorize them on a data sheet, think how confusing it must be for a machine in a recycling plant. So before we go on, I just wanted to quickly ask if there were any other items that people found difficult to categorize in their waste, and anything that caused you a couple of issues, or mixed materials. Yeah. Matthias put metallic plastic packaging, which is very true. Sometimes really hard to know. I think that has different recycling rules as well. Yep, seasoned chip bags was one of them. Parchment paper. Yeah, that's another tricky one.
I'm not sure about that one either, to be honest.
No, neither. I have to check the waste wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I found another one that was often in the other category was styrofoam, which I think people found it hard, not necessarily to know whether it could be recycled or not, but whether it went in the plastic category or not, which was pretty interesting as well. I think that's a tricky one.
So I searched it, and parchment paper in Toronto, it goes to garbage bin.
Oh.
Okay.
Landfill, yes. Oh yes.
Sad face from Susan.
Yes.
Okay, so that's the main results from the data. So now I'm going to hand you back over to Chelsea for a roundup of what we've gone through so far and some more time for questions.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Hannah, and thank you, Raphaela. So just to give us sort of an overall summary of what we think are some of the main findings from this study, so first of all, participants felt like they learned something new. So we're thrilled. One of our missions in the trash team is to increase waste literacy, and it seems like within this project we did. One of the things we think is really interesting is that waste streams are diverse. And as much as I know this and talk about this in talks when I go travel or go to plastic conferences, I didn't expect it to be so different between such neighboring cities. So even I was surprised by that result, just to see just how unharmonized they were. We learned that learning the waste streams and reusing materials seemed simple, but what really seemed tough was buying products with less packaging. And I think we knew that, but it's just sad to see on paper, right? And to think about the fact that that is difficult, right? And to think about how we can make that change. And for some of that, it might be writing letters to politicians or contacting our local companies or even our giant global companies. In terms of our overall waste, we decreased our landfill waste, which was our overall goal. So we should be really excited, right? Taking these steps to make a difference. And we increased our recycling waste. So we were sending more materials into a circular economy. But overall, as we said, our waste items were similar. And so that means we've got some room to keep going. So as those of you said, you're building up your habits over 4 weeks and over time. maybe we'll build up more. And I would say personally, I agree with Greg. I did the waste audit as well, but didn't submit my data. So we weren't part of the 15. But I also found that because I think about this stuff so much already, right? We're sort of preaching to the choir. I could reduce some stuff in the beginning, which I got really excited about. And then I was like, what do I do now? Right? So here we are, we're talking to people where you guys were already thinking about it before. So it would be really fun. And actually we plan to do this waste audit. So Kate, not in the schools, we haven't approached a school about that yet, but that's a great idea. But we're talking to the Toronto Region Conservation Authority about doing this in industry. So having people who work in companies doing the home waste audit. So broader audience where it's people who didn't come to us, but TRCA was already working with them. And then overall, we decreased our use of plastic, which is quite fitting because you might remember that July was Plastic Free July, and this was an event that we put on for Plastic Free July. So overall, I think we did a great job. We learned a lot. Seems like you learned a lot, and we had a lot of fun doing it, and we hope that you did too. Before we go and just do a quick little wrap up about kind of what's next for us and about some more tips, does anyone have any questions about anything that you may have encountered within the waste audit or about any of the data, or even some suggestions or feedback for us, given that this was our first time and not our last? Feel free to raise hands or go ahead and type in the chat if anyone has any questions, comments. Perhaps adding some categories for the tally. Yeah, so we also felt like maybe we should add some examples of just how detailed we mean when you tallied. And actually, to be honest, we weren't sure how many people were just going to add volume and how many would take that extra next step of tallying. Every single one of you tallied, which is why we were able to show the count data instead of the weight data, which was very cool. So we will definitely take that on board and make a more refined list. Thank you. Anything else? Questions or comments? Maybe some more of an open conversation between the group as we go. Sarah, do you mind if I unmute you or unmuting yourself and giving us a bit more? I'd love to know kind of what you mean, because we would love to interact more if people are interested.
Yeah, I guess maybe, I don't know, setting up some kind of group where everyone taking part can just chat and ask questions and see where people are getting kind of tips from throughout the process.
Yeah, I love that idea. So maybe we set up kind of like a, even like a Slack group during the time where people can communicate the entire time. And that's a great idea. Thank you, Sarah. We have a question, Hannah, for you from Greg. Did the weight decrease too, or just the number of items?
So the weight did, I think it increased actually. So I think it increased more than the number of items, but it had a lot of fluctuation in it, which I couldn't really explain. There was lots of ups and downs with landfill and recycling and overall volume. So
yeah, and it's not weight, it's volume. Sorry, I messed up when I said weight.
That's okay. Yeah, so I think it was harder to show any kind of trends with the volume data, and it seemed like even though the number of items didn't change very much, the volume increased slightly. So yeah, it was tricky. So I think I'm not sure whether it would be easier for everyone to count items in the future.
Yeah, we might skip the volume part unless anybody feels like that would be something really sad to let go.
Yeah, exactly. It's the size of the items makes it tricky.
Anything else? A repurposed section. Would this be to, so that we can see not just what people are recycling, but also what they're reusing? That's a great idea too, and would help us with tips. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Carol. Any other final words or questions? Okay. All right, so we just have a final few more slides just to, one, remind you that waste reduction doesn't have to stop here, which you all noted before. So this, Greg, I'll answer your question in 1 second. So some of you mentioned that 4 weeks just isn't enough in order to create those habits, right? So ideally, over time, these habits stick, which is why you do have one final survey coming up to see whether some of these behaviors stick. And if you're looking for trash or waste reduction tips along the way, we have our trash team tips, which are on our website. So these we're running on social media throughout all of Plastic Free July, but they are living on our website. And to answer Greg's question, this data will be public. So our goal is actually to turn the entire thing into like a little report and put it up on our website on the Home Waste Audit page. So it will be there. We just might wait until that final survey. We're not sure yet. So, but we will definitely let everyone know once that this information is up. And it will be, what is the word I'm looking for? You won't be able to, Raphaela, what's the word? You won't be able to see whose data is whose.
Anonymous.
Anonymized. Thank you. Yeah, just like today. Thank you, Susan. And then finally, so that final survey, as I mentioned, it is coming up in October. So please stay tuned for that. We will be sending you an email to remind you, and we'll also send you an email to share with you this video so that you can have these data in terms of on this audit. It'll be on our YouTube page, and as we said, we'll be making that report. And also just to remind everyone finally that September, which is, believe it or not, right around the corner, is International Coastal Cleanup Month. We work closely with the Ocean Conservancy and will be leading our second annual Urban Litter Challenge. So this one will be our social distancing edition, where we will have small cleanups all around the city of Toronto. But you don't have to live here to be part of the International Coastal Cleanup. And Susan actually just put in the chat how to lead a cleanup right here in Canada. And if you're interested, for those of you in the United States, you can go to the Ocean Conservancy website. So hopefully we'll see you out there cleaning in September. Everybody, please stay safe, stay healthy. If you have any questions, reach out to us anytime. And thank you so much for joining in our very first Home Waste Audit. Have a fantastic evening.